Hi, this is Riva Starr on Music Radar. So when I started the label, first of all, I wanted to release a label for years, but I also thought that I needed to wait for the right time to have the right music and the right amount of exposure in order to have the best launch of the label. And that happened in 2010 when I released my first album, and I Was Drunk was the track I did with Nose on Get Physical, that they were an act from Get Physical Music. Um, Came out, and it became like a big massive track, and I had my 15 minutes, which I hated it in a way because I don't like to have too much attention. I feel like I work better when things are a bit more less on me in terms of attention. I'm not a particular fan of the spotlight, even though I understand that some of it is important to keep going and be present even on social and whatever. So I started in 2010. We had some amazing releases, and my main rule was that everything I was releasing on Snatch was something that I would play in the club, and sonically it had to be on a certain level. So that's why since the beginning we've always done the old school way of doing A&Ring, so also helping some of the producers improving the sound, maybe sometimes helping with the mix down, edits and whatever. So it's been a very tailor-made, careful sort of way of operating the label. We used to do vinyl pretty much on each release, so we had to be careful about the quality of the music as well, as all the timing, the production timing involved, and yeah, through the years, I suppose nowadays everyone can release music easily, and through the digitals, and inflate the market with no second thoughts. So that makes it more difficult. It's because there's a sea of releases coming out every week, if not every day, and it's hard to get the exposure you want. I think gear-wise, honestly, I've been working with pretty much the same stuff forever. It's just that sometimes the synth, instead of being the Juno, was the OB6, and I was excited because it was brand new. So now I'm excited about this thing because it allows me to play in different setups. I can sync, the 707 with these ones through the CV gate and do different layers, and maybe even spread the different channels on different channels inputs from the Prism or the Antelope, and do different recordings and mix in a different way, more creative way. And this is exciting right now at the present day. But as well, having musicians in the room, as I said, it is as exciting because you learn new things every time, and that's crucial for me to keep, my hunger for music alive. I've never been very technical. I'm very hands-on on everything in the studio, and I still like to play with analog outboards. I never quite found my way through just the full-on in the box sort of mixing, even though every now and then happens that you have those mix downs that when you try to put on the mixer, it just doesn't work. Like I did a track with Todd Terry called This Is The Sound on Hot Creation, and which has been one of my biggest tracks of late. And that is a bounce. It's left and right as it came out of Ableton. Sometimes you find that right layering sequence of sounds, and that right mastering chain, and I don't know, the calculation of all the sounds just makes sense. And every time I tried to do a mix down and test it, someone was getting lost. Yeah, maybe most of the time it's down to demoitis, like you get used to the demo. But in reality, for that particular one, and fun enough, for another track called Deep Inside, still on Hot Creation, I ended up using the left and right bounce. But most of the time, I just use outboards, just testing the Prism as a converter. I use the Galaxy, the Antelope, which has nice converters as well. And then sometimes I run everything, the drums through the SSL bus compressor. Sometimes I use the distressor for the bass. So it really depends, the whole processing chain. I've always worked with so many of them, like great producers, great people. Rather than technical skills, what I mostly learned is that you need to be humble. You need to be you need to understand that in the end you're making music. You're not um, you're making music. You know, like you need to be open to the collaboration. You need to be open to and ready to accept that music is the guy, is the star here. It's not you. You need to be in acceptance of everyone's differences. Everyone is different. It's important if you do a collaboration that you embrace the differences and you find the common points, the touching points in between your two different worlds. Um, and and these are the you know the best things I've learned. Ego is important, of sure. I'm not saying otherwise, but having ego ruling the game, that's wrong. You know, and there's a lot of ego going on right now, which I think ends up ruining the scene and some of the interactions. Sometimes I see some back-to-backs, for instance, in DJing, uh, that you can clearly see that rather than, you know, putting their knowledge together in order to create something new and even higher in terms of quality, it's a bit like, let's see who can actually get more exposure and be the one that wins the back-to-back. Back-to-back is a collaboration in a way. Same with a collaboration in the studio. It's not like I have to put my stamp on it. It's what works to serve the music that we are making together, right? Like I used to play vinyl back in the days. I used to uh, bring with me stuff like this to do loops, and then I switched to CDs and then to USBs. So I've changed a lot of setups, and at some point I was bringing my TR8 with me, which is the Roland drum machine, beat matching on the records, adding extra elements. But then I settled myself with 4 CDJs, or at least 3, where I can play with loops. And usually I always like to keep the groove going and having loops and changing records while the loop is still on, so that you have that sort of constant groove going on, and changing it every now and then, or playing with acapellas, making loops with acapellas, and playing with textures as well. And I do a lot of edits. Some of the tracks I like, maybe they are not very DJ friendly, and maybe I do my own edit, or the sound is not exactly the way I want it to be, so I end up doing some proper mastering or processing, adding extra bass, or maybe if I feel that a track needs an extra kick drum. So I want to try and keep the sound consistent while I play. And that's something I hope people can find when I do my DJ sets, that there's some nice constant groove going on. Obviously I have my breakdowns and whatever, but I'm not a big fan of big drum rolls or big white noises, effects and stuff. I like to play with some effects as well, but mainly my key thing is to keep the groove going and prepare some of the edits in a way that the song doesn't let me down when I'm playing it in the club, because the edit is not working for my style of DJing, if that makes sense, which is a mixture of um, what was going on back in the days in Italy in the 90s, like getting that loop going, but still that house approach of playing vocals sometimes, and doing breakdowns, or taking pauses, or even just doing curveballs without killing the vibe at the same time. Having that journey where you try and put the tracks at the right time um, to make it work. I've been making music since I was 14, possibly, and I've always been very eclectic. At first, this was a problem. It probably still is a problem because people get confused sometimes. But through the years, I've managed to handle the different sides to my production a bit more. Hence, I started different side projects. Coming from Napoli, obviously, there's a huge house and techno scene even from the 90s. So that was a big, massive influence for me. But also, having this sort of breakbeats, drum and bass influence from from England, and all influence from dub and whatever just took me to different places through the years in terms of productions. And I found that when I was releasing everything under my one project, people would get confused, promoter would get confused, and I was getting like kind of angry at it at first, because like, come on, you don't understand it. But then, I realized that it's normal. If you follow an act that has a certain sound, you wouldn't expect from that act to release something totally different that makes no sense with what was producing before, unless you have a bit of transition or whatever sort of evolution. So I decided to start different projects according to the different vibes. So that's why I had this Soul Speech project, which is a bit more of a crossover house vibe. And then I had Genghis Clan, which is more like bass house coming from Dirty Bird. My early start was with Dirty Bird. I always like to play with big bass lines coming from breaks and whatever. I have Hyperloop, which is more on the techno side, and it's like more funk, techno, loopy stuff that wouldn't fit, for instance, the Riva Starr project. So since I ended up doing like that, my life got easier, and and there's two benefits to it. First, it allows me to be ruthless on that particular direction. Whereas if I was doing something as Riva that was a bit more techno, yes, but I need to keep it a bit houseier because it's Riva, whatever. Whereas if it's Hyperloop, I can go, the way you want in terms of creativity and exploring that genre. And second, allows me, because I'm very prolific in the studio, I make a lot of tracks, allows me to release multiple stuff at the same time or in the same period without just inflating the market with the same name. And that's priceless for me, because I need to make music and expand my creativity with different projects, because it helps me keeping my mind fresh and on the edge. One of the main things is don't get too stressed about other people's thoughts about your music, other people's feedback. There's always an agenda behind anything, even more with the feedbacks. You don't know what the person giving that particular feedback is doing. And I think this thing sometimes, mostly at the early stage, it was kind of like dictating some of the direction I was taking and making weird choices. For instance, the first album I made under my own name, it was like a pretty much underground album with some very cool collaborations. But there was a couple of tracks with a very good-looking singer that were a bit poppier, and they talked me into making the whole project like a band project, even though I just had 2 tracks with there. And I was so insecure, and the feedback were coming with an agenda again, that I ended up making that big mistake, and I'm still regretting about it. So my suggestion is just try and be as sure as possible about where you want to head to, what you want to achieve. Only you and only you know about what you want, what you like, and not everyone ever will like everything you do. It's impossible. Try and connect to your people, to the people that are in your circle. Once you connect with them, you can propose new stuff and eventually try different paths and see how they react. And but at least that it's a circle that understands where you want to go, and also having trustworthy people around you can be very helpful, because if you start getting some traction and all of a sudden you have plenty of sharks around, then you end up losing the sight of what's right and what's wrong. Whereas if you have trusted people around, they have a good idea of what's going on and can definitely help you. And I've been there as well. Like, it's important to have people that you trust their judgment and can actually help you in blurred moments.